Hello, lovely to speak with you, Lana, or should I say Professor McNally. Very nice of you to join me today on our Hunter Where It Be It podcast. I met you
My pleasure.
and came across you recently because of your work with InToxFire and because I'm a University of Ulster alumni and I know you're attached to the University of Ulster. Svetlana, could I ask you to just give our listeners a little bit of a flavor of who you are, what your background is, some of your career highlights, and how you got to work on this project InToxFire?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, Simon, and thanks very much for having me on this podcast. As I said, my name is Svetlana Tretsiakova. I work at Ulster University. When you were studying, it was called University of Ulster. Now the words has changed, but the focus remains the same. I'm a senior lecturer in chemistry at the Belfast School of Architecture and Built Environment. I teach here a variety of subjects from chemistry to mathematics, but most importantly, aerodynamics, materials, toxicity, expressions of fire. I'm a chemist by trade, so have over 17 years of postdoctoral experience working actually in the laboratory where we were dealing with a polymeric fire retardants, studying how the polymers are degrading when we apply high temperatures, how those materials which are there designed to protect polymers, what happens to them
Okay.
when they've been heated up. My bachelor and master's degree from Belarusian State University. My doctoral thesis were focused on the chemistry of a natural polymer, which is cellulose. We have plenty of this material in Belarus. I moved to Northern Ireland more than 20 years ago, and this is when I have started my career at Ulster University. I have joined Fire Safety Engineering Research and Technology Center, abbreviated as FireCert, very famous and unique center on the island of Ireland. And throughout my career, I have studied physical, chemical transformations, mechanisms of decomposition, thermal decomposition, combustibility of natural and synthetic polymers, different materials, plastics, textiles. And only recently, really, I've started looking at the toxicity of the
Yeah.
fire effluent. I teach it a lot to students, but actually doing this in the lab, I have started this about maybe 4 years ago.
I loved my time at University of Ulster. Unfortunately for me, my studied subject was much less interesting. I did accountancy, so much less interesting than what you're doing. I was so delighted to be invited by you to join your expert panel for InToxFire. And I'm really looking forward to participating more. Can you sort of give us a little bit of an outline about, how this project started, how it was funded, what the express purpose of the project is, and some of the highlights as to where the focus of the work will be in respect of the overall objectives?
I think, Simon, and I think this support from industry is really valuable and important to us. Thanks for guiding us and even giving us some research questions. And in fact, the project started as a small industrial project where a producer manufacturer of textiles, protective textiles, had a question about the role of membrane. And when I started making those experiments in the lab, I have realized that there are so many unanswered questions there, and that it's not just simply a 6 months project where I simply do a testing of membrane and maybe give an answer. So this is how it's all come in. So this essentially, it came from industry. It triggered, they had an interest that triggered my interest. And we understood, okay, we need to do more. We need to maybe to seek for funding, have a international project overall. So the funder, who is called UL Research Institutes, they're based in USA.
Yeah.
They awarded us, myself as a principal investigator, a significant funding to run a project, 3-year project called InToxFire. And this is where we investigate the movement of toxic chemicals which are formed in fires, the movement of those chemicals through the layers of protective clothing. protective clothing only. We're looking at fire suits and tunics, maybe trousers and so on. There's a multi-layer
Yeah.
ensembles. We really wanted to find out what happens to those toxicants, because what forms in fire, I call it a nasty toxic cocktail, toxic soup. And there are so many compounds there, and they could be classed in different ways. And we were interested what happens, why the firefighters, but statistics, I will talk a little bit later about the statistics, is really not pleasant about firefighters' health and well-being and so on. So why, well, these brave people are actually maybe given nasty diagnosis when they retire. So that was my main point. Why we cannot protect them, although we have great equipment. If you look at firefighter going into fire, so yeah, this
Yeah.
person is very well protected, but why this is happening? So this is how it started. It started with
Yeah.
a query from industry, which is then developed by academics here at Ulster University at FireCert
And
into international project. Yeah.
Lana, the subject that started it, you mentioned, is basically about the membrane, and the firefighting membrane is a fascinating part of PP, fascinating part of the PP ensemble, where we've got, an outer fabric, we've got an insulating layer, and in between we've got this waterproof, breathable layer that people call a membrane, people call it EPTFE, but it's a really fascinating and complex layer. And I know there's some controversy globally in respect of membranes and other layers within firefighting PP as well, connected with PFAS and so forth. And in fact, in the United States at the minute, obviously a very litigious environment compared to most of Europe, let's say, or the UK. And there is a bit of a move in the United States to take membranes out of PPE, with a view to decreasing PFAS exposure, for example. My understanding that is coming with its own challenges, and that the firefighting PP is just not lasting as long as it otherwise would with this membrane layer in. So there's a potential for budgetary challenge, and I've actually spoken on the Hunter Where It Be podcast with people about that before. Sometimes perhaps there's an unintended consequence by removing a membrane. What exactly is the challenge in relation to the membrane within the PPE ensemble, within that sort of fabric sandwich, if you like, that makes up a firefighting tunic, makes up firefighting trousers, makes up firefighting gloves, for example, even boots and today hoods also, all of these layers to some degree or other contain a firefighting protective membrane. What is the specific challenge of the membrane? Why is it different, or why is it more challenging than the outer or the inner layer?
Well, I think you have started really even answering a little bit about what are the issues. You mentioned PFAS, and I just wanted to expand a little bit. But firstly, we need to understand that, this big workforce, firefighters, I think we have over 40,000 firefighters in the UK, and there's part-timers and the volunteer firefighters, which is quite important. Some of them are non-career firefighters. I think in Northern Ireland, it's around 1,800 firefighters. So we need to understand what they're exposed to, which is called a fire effluent. And we have a variety of products. And it's not just smoke. It's not just black dots, which we sometimes see, or green smoke, which we see. They contain carbon monoxide, hydrogen cyanide, which are asphyxiants. But hopefully, and I think the breathing apparatus is working against it, but there are products of incomplete combustion, which is very common. It's a part of fire development, which are called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, abbreviated as PAHs.
Mhm.
And seems to be currently PPE and membranes are very good at repelling those
Yeah.
compounds. There are also some volatile compounds or semi-volatile compounds, so it means they can maybe permeate through the outer shell, outer layer of PPE, but could be maybe stopped or could be trapped between the layers and be settled on the surface of membrane. And what happens to this PPE? I think a firefighter took this off, took his coat off, and then maybe left it in the boot of the car. The temperature maybe in some countries could be above 40 degrees Celsius, and
Mhm.
those volatiles will start to evaporate without a doubt. And
Mhm.
there could be a child sitting in the back of the car, without even knowing this is a hidden risk. They might
Yes.
be smelling something, okay? And
Yes.
this is quite likely. What you have also mentioned, PFAS. PFAS is a per or polyfluorinated alkyl hydrocarbons. It's basically carbon chain with fluorine atoms attached. From a chemical point of view, this is a
Yeah.
very stable molecule. A CF, these are the atoms, lots of them there in one chain. Very strong bond and very difficult to break them down. They're known as forever chemicals. When they are in the environment, built a natural environment, you can't get rid of them. If they're in waters and soils, they remain forever. This is what it actually means.
Yes.
So when the World Health Organization started looking at different of those classes, which I have mentioned, in 2022, they decided, okay, firefighting is actually recategorized as a carcinogenic activity by
Yeah.
the International Agency of Research on Cancer. And they started to classify those compounds, which I just mentioned, into the non-carcinogen, possibly a probable carcinogen. So those PFAS, which you mentioned, is about maybe 20,000 of those substances, materials exist, and they started to make their way to this list of cancerous
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
compounds. So
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
one of them is this is called octa fluorinated compounds. So it means it has 8 carbons and fluorines attached to them. This compound was until 2025 was not even on my list, but then it made a jump to the top. It's
mm-hmm,
now considered to be carcinogenic, and it could be a part of those membranes. Okay, that's what you were saying. So those
mm-hmm.
PFAS definitely carcinogenic. I'm not saying that all other more than 20,000 are carcinogenic, but some of them are there.
Okay.
I must stress, Simon, this is not just, we shouldn't really think about PPE as a
Yeah.
source of PFAS.
Yeah.
Firefighting foam, again,
Yeah.
this is what I teach the students, is
Uh,
full of PFAS, a variety of them. Imagine you're wearing PFAS, you have a firefighting foam, without a doubt.
is it
Firefighters will be exposed to those compounds.
I've heard it said, I don't know if it's necessarily true or fair to say this, but is it the case really that in the modern world that it's almost impossible to find anything without PFAS contamination to some extent? I mean, I've read that it's inside us, it's in our blood, absorbed in many different ways. It's in practically everything that we touch and use in our kitchens, in our workplaces. It is abundant and prolific as that, or is that not really correct?
I really cannot comment because this is something which we're probably exposed, and we probably have some particulars such as maybe microplastics which may have PFAS as part of them.
Yeah.
And this is definitely in our system. When we're talking about firefighters, they're more likely to be exposed to PFAS because they have those components. They have the suits, they have boots, they are water repellent, and the water repellency comes from PFAS. The chemical repellent, it comes from PFAS. So the
Yeah.
chances of them to get PFAS into their body is much higher. And it's not just by touching maybe those layers, but perhaps as something is, as I said, a smoke, which may be a carrier of those PFAS compounds. PFAS, I'm not really saying that PFAS are all bad. They're there for a reason. And this is
Mm-hmm.
one of what we have discovered through our
Mm-hmm.
studies, that, yeah, maybe if we get rid of all PFAS, we'll solve a problem, but we will be introducing an alternative. And the
Yeah.
alternative is not always great. I mean, PFAS, if we take it out, maybe thermal comfort of firefighters will be impacted, or even the protection from these known chemicals.
Yeah.
Whatever we're putting alternatives in,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they have
Mm-hmm.
atoms of bromine, chlorine, and these are precursors of dioxins, furans, and so on, which are
Yeah.
also carcinogens as well. So this is a balancing act. We
Yeah.
really don't have to say 100% no to PFAS. We
Yeah.
really need to be careful what we're selecting, as I said. Maybe you can get a
Yeah.
PFAS which will not be carcinogenic. That's my point.
Yeah. So perhaps it's fair to say there's not necessarily a right answer. I know that, whereas in the United States it seems a massive push to remove PFAS from firefighting PPE. There's a whole background of sort of litigious behaviors that have sort of driven that. There are companies out there talking about PFAS free fabrics or PFAS-free PPE. I've also heard it sort of termed sort of like no knowingly added PFAS as another terminology, almost like, a bit like my Coca-Cola here, zero sugar, or some of these types of products are called, sugar knowingly added. If you look at diluted oranges and so forth, a bit simpler perhaps, but there can be some unintended consequences. I've heard that the risk of burns can go up if you don't have these moisture barriers. Is that something you've come across?
We are only like on, I think we're in a year, we have done maybe 18 months on the project. Month 18 is finishing now. And we have tested some PPE. We have some PPE actually from the US, where it's sort of light on PFAS. Um, we can't really, it's not really so the work is still in progress, but what we will see, it's definitely more permeable to moisture. So we know that firefighters, there's water everywhere, okay? And the problem with moisture, so there's more moisture going through and might be in contact with firefighter skin. That's if we remove PFAS, okay, or if we completely remove it. So what comes with moisture is not just molecules of water. It could be compounds which are dissolved in water.
Yes.
Again, this is from fire effluent, high
Yeah.
temperature, lots of moisture. What we'll have, for instance, aldehydes. Aldehydes is the most potent. So acrolein, formaldehyde, and we were doing those analytical work. We're trying to detect, have they been drawn? So we see that the permeation of moisture is increasing. And if it's increasing, therefore, the dermal absorption of say, compounds like aldehydes, water soluble products of combustions, isocyanates, for instance, there. To our surprise, what we have found, we were talking a lot about cancer, but I have to stress there are some other illnesses like pulmonary diseases, heats, and I know there are other known cancers for firefighters, but there are some other problems, mental health, is just lots of things. What we have discovered it was a surprise to us, is to find a compound belongs to class of phthalates, and it's enzyme disruptor. So it's causing some diseases caused by the enzymes which are in our body being disrupted, which could be quite serious, really. And we found them in colossal amounts. And this is just because you mentioned PFAS, and the other things we have phthalates. So any water bottle you have, any plastic you have, you will have
Yeah.
phthalates there. And phthalates, again, the group of compounds which could be water soluble as well. And we found them that was our surprise. We didn't mean to see it, but we found it. And then we started looking at any plastic we burn has phthalates, which are additives, they're plasticizers, they're part of the product of the problem. So anything contains phthalates.
So it's such a complex problem. I mean, if I understood you correctly, you're saying there's basically about 20,000 types of PFAS. Is that correct? So, I mean, do we even have any comprehension really of how many nanotoxins firefighters could be exposed to over the course of career? I mean, is it into the hundreds of thousands, or is it even bigger than that?
Yeah, we're really talking about thousands of compounds
Thousands.
in that
Okay.
this toxic suits, right? But there are methods, analytical methods, which allow us to determine and identify those compounds and make libraries. Okay, this is one of the part of
Yeah.
our project is to select some of those which are maybe on the IR list or not on the IR list. As I mentioned, there's something unknown which is right in our face and say, look, this is there. And it's not been recognized yet, but maybe it will be as a result of our project. Thousands of compounds. With regards to PFAS is one of the problems
Yeah.
that there are no reliable and sensitive analytical technique in place. Well, currently we don't have in the lab. Hopefully by the end of the project, we'll at least develop an analytical method which allows us to say, okay, this is a
Yeah.
PFAS with 8 carbon atoms. And
Okay.
it's difficult at the moment. It's really
Okay.
difficult to do it.
And I mean, in an overall context, I mean, this study is truly fascinating. I mean, it's fair to say this is a world leading study. This is not just a sort of a UK study or a sort of a European leading story. Is the real context of InToxFire that it's a world leading study?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing this across. It's Ulster University who is doing the work, but it's actually really has international importance. As I said, we're testing fire suits from the States, from
Yeah,
Ireland, from UK,
yeah,
from France, from Italy. We're testing fire suits which are new, maybe absolutely modern, light ones
uh,
with no
yeah,
PFAS, other ones which have been retired, and to find the programs which
yeah,
were there, and maybe firefighters who wore those fire suits years ago, cleaned or uncleaned. So
sure.
this is definitely international. We have a lot of educational events
Uh-huh,
planned in our project.
uh-huh.
The last webinar, I think you were a part of it in August, at a huge audience
Yeah,
of 220 participants from,
fantastic.
I think, 65 countries from across the globe.
My goodness,
Yeah.
and no doubt those 200 people have passed that on to interested parties within their own countries or further afield. I mean, I know the focus of this is fire, but I remember I was at a conference in England. I think it was at John Lord. I'm sure you've come across John Lord, perhaps, at one of his conferences, and I'm sure he had something on the screen where it was basically showing a structural fire, a house fire, and the sort of the toxic spread for first responders in general. So although firefighters might enter the burning building and therefore get the highest levels of exposure, what he was trying to communicate at the time that was so interesting was when the residents of the house were being brought out of the house, of course, they are also covered in contamination. Paramedics were responding with stretchers, getting these individuals onto the stretchers. The stretchers now covered in contamination. The paramedics are covered in contamination. They're now loading somebody and some things that are covered in contamination into the back of the ambulance appliance. Now, the back of the ambulance appliance that, ideally you would want to be hyper clean and very sterile is now covered in contaminants. The police are on the outer cordon of the scenario. Doors are open in the patrol cars. There's the sort of magic carpet effect of nanotoxins and, moving around in the air, entering their vehicles, also coming under their protective clothing as well. So although we're talking today really about firefighters, that this problem to some extent does affect all frontline workers, first responders.
Well, this is definitely the case. It's not just firefighters. Even those people, those who are not protected. For them, occupants of the buildings, for instance,
Yeah.
where the fire
Yeah.
occurred, this is probably just one off. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
nevertheless, they may not know what they're dealing with. Okay, they're taking a
Yeah.
part which has been burnt. Our skin works as a sponge, and loads of those toxicants go in. They can inhale it. They can hand to mouth. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
firefighters were, for instance, fighting fires, wildfires, lots of them
Mm-hmm.
quite frequently happening. You so they're not wearing the equipment. They can't wear the
Mm-hmm.
breathing
Mm-hmm.
apparatus and so on. Then they have
Mm-hmm.
a sandwich afterwards. So this is
Yeah.
definitely happening. So we really need to consider a variety of workers. I think John Lord is actually now working with a lot of airport workers. They're also
Yes.
exposed to those chemicals
Uh-huh.
as
Uh-huh.
well. And the problem if you have fire, so if you see those suits, and just going back to, what's the problem with nanoparticles, small particles, which we see, not be just they are carriers for those toxins, for the smaller compounds, which are really more harmful for us. So if we're
Yeah.
talking about fire retardants, they might produce hydrogen bromide, hydrogen chloride, which are extremely acidic, very strong acids. And they have a tendency to hook themselves, to attach themselves to the particulate matter, to this black soot particles. And
Mm-hmm.
once
Mm-hmm.
they're inhaled,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just the soot. So these molecules, which we don't see, but very soluble in water, they will be soluble in our bodies as well,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Mm-hmm.
will start acting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What it's called, perhaps I should have mentioned, I always talk about this as synergy. So we might have a contaminant A and contaminant B. Once they're in
Yeah.
our body, they start boosting so they don't really like, one is affect liver, another affect heart. They might produce something else, which
Mm-hmm.
maybe will be affecting the brain, for instance, or circular system. It's called the synergy. So their impact is not just double, maybe triple, and so there may be some unknown
So
effects.
it's the cocktail effects as the mixing of these things becomes more dangerous than the individual component parts themselves.
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
yeah. Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the personnel, they just don't know it. This is when we were talking with firefighters, retired and still in place. They're supporting the project big time and said, we just didn't know. We don't know, we didn't know back then. Our knowledge may be improved nowadays, but they need to have access to good education training. Tests like this, I think they're a really great idea because they're openly available. Go onto YouTube, click, you see somebody's talking, it's freely available, and it's accurate information about, okay, say benzene may cause leukemia,
Hmm. Hmm.
styrene may cause prostate cancer. I
Yeah.
think this sort of very simple knowledge
Hmm.
this is what we are hoping to achieve by the end of the project, to have an
Yeah.
openly available, accurate information about
Yes.
impact of those chemicals and how then to protect. So I think this knowledge, educating first responders, educating those who are training first responders, training the trainer programs, they must be in place across the globe.
Yeah. I mean, this topic is very niche of itself, but there are kind of niches within niches, if I can say that. Something that's becoming very interesting. I was at an event in Belfast recently, hosted by HS. The guy Kevin Howlett, and he and his organization are particularly focused on EVs and lithium ion battery fires and the exposures and the toxicity that comes with them. I mean, that's a super interesting area, or I mean, a kind of a risk that's probably not well enough understood even at a residential level. We're all becoming so completely hooked on EV batteries everywhere, charging batteries, and maybe people guilty of using the wrong charger with particular pieces of equipment and the risks around that, and put an increasing amount of EV cars on the road. But what are the kind of exposures that can happen to frontline first responders? Again, not just firefighters, obviously, but significantly firefighters when they're responding to an EV battery car, like a road traffic accident. What kind of exposures? What are the problematic toxins that occur that are particularly associated with EV technology?
Well, with EV technology, I think, yes, we were all sort of, we have to become more sustainable and switch to electrical vehicle. Great. But we are talking about lithium ion batteries, and the problem with lithium ion batteries, they can go into thermal runaway. And this is from the point of view of protecting firefighters, it develops very fast. It may lead to explosions. So, the loss of life is possible. The other problem is a specific set of contaminants or toxicants which are formed. For lithium-ion batteries, it will be, for instance, hydrogen fluoride, a compound which produced in great amounts when lithium-ion batteries are burning. And they, of course, as I said, they can interact with some other organic matter and make things much worse. There's also a lot of heavy metal particles produced, and some of them have a tendency to bioaccumulate. Okay, so it's another problem with this. What happens if it's maybe in a confined place? Decontamination, how do we get rid of this hydrogen fluoride or those particular matters containing metals? This is where I
Hmm.
said, will water be sufficient?
Hmm.
Probably not.
Although I have seen some data, albeit it was American data. I think it was from a study in Texas, and basically they were showing that heavy metals tend to accumulate on the outside of the PPE. Is that
That's
something
true.
you've seen? Whereas SVOCs and PFAS type chemistries would be more prone to passing through the layers. Is that
Yeah.
something you concur with?
I think I would confirm that those contaminants, heavy metals, will tend to be stopped by a good PPE, and because they're heavy, they will just simply through the
Yeah.
gravity. But nevertheless, I think we can't get rid of everything. And as I said, those heavy metals, and if you have wrong suppressing agent, may react. Okay, so as a chemist, I can tell you, for instance, that aluminium or lithium, they
Hmm.
easily react with water.
Yeah.
There's a reaction of water. Okay, they will dissolve in water. They produce hydrogen gas. Hydrogen gas and oxygen are form explosive mixtures. There is something which must be considered. Sometimes when you hear in the news that we could hear explosions when the firefighters applied water, is likely that some of those very reactive metals, such as lithium aluminum, reacted with water and forming this a gas,
Hmm.
which are going to mix with oxygen, and again,
I mean, I
could
mean,
be that dangerous.
I mean, are particulates more dangerous or more problematic than gases, or the other way around? What would you say?
Particulates, in a way, the current protective equipment is designed to stop the particulates, the ones which are, they're not water soluble. So we sort of can maybe see them even. The most dangerous is the ones which has a tendency to dissolve in moisture and droplets of water, and they become really invisible. Okay, so those are, which I said, they're reacted with something. So the gases, the volatiles, they may undergo transfer, and they will undergo transformation in fires at high temperatures. And this is the unknown, which is then maybe soluble in water, may go, it may be drawn, and the firefighters may be exposed to this, not just firefighters. Yeah.
Yes, whether the problem is a soluble chemistry or an insoluble chemistry makes a big difference as to whether or not it could possibly be helped by a water-based wash, or whether water-based washing is totally unsuitable. I know that this is something obviously we're quite studied on, is the waterproof breathable membrane, and that once that layer gets contaminated, you simply can't clean it with water because it's waterproof, and that's something that we're obviously very, very interested in. What about asbestos? That seems to be a very controversial, I would say, perhaps not well understood contaminant, because it's very, very different, isn't it? It's a very, very complex molecule. I mean, what about asbestos and its relationship with firefighting PPE? Can you tell us what happens when firefighters get exposure to asbestos, for example?
Again, there's something which we really cannot even study in the lab because we cannot really pass. We're not allowed to work with toxic compounds like this. But I mean, the exposure to asbestos has severe consequences. It's well recognized, which is good in a way. So if exposure happens, then maybe PP could be demolished or destroyed and so on. And in a way, I think it requires perhaps some funding somewhere to study what is occurrence that should be done, maybe not in the university laboratory, but maybe specialized hazmat
Hmm.
labs, which where you have staff working and
Hmm.
can be
Hmm.
actually
Hmm.
dealing with
Hmm.
asbestos. Unfortunately, in universities, just it's unlikely scenario. But as asbestos, as I said, it can be a career. It can happen. I mean, for older buildings, heritage buildings, this is happening.
I mean, I've read that the HSE position is just that there's no safe level of exposure to asbestos, and um, is asbestos, is it one of those things that is soluble in water, or is it a non-soluble? I mean, can you wash asbestos out of firefighting PPE? What's your view on
From
that?
the chemical point of view, I don't think asbestos is soluble. The microparticles, the fibers, microfibers, I doubt they will be washed. But again, it requires probably further research. I think it's because of the dangers of asbestos is known. There's not much like the work is done in this area.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. I know that I spoke earlier about the fact that America is going down this route where they're trying to get rid of PFAS. I know that in the UK, the National Fire Chiefs Council have a current process on for PPE, and the current UK position is that the waterproof membrane is still important, for all the reasons that we understand. It's a highly protective layer, and that might change over time. But it seems that there are sort of two attitudes in the world really when it comes to this. One that's very, very anti-PFAS, maybe driven by litigation and so forth, and then another kind of attitude in the world that is sort of saying, well, maybe there's no great alternative solution here, so we're going to stay with what we know, even though we understand there are some risks. Is that really the way you see it?
Um, I mean, there's certainly we can, I'm sort of immune optimistic that there will be some alternative found to
Yeah.
PFAS, which is going to be sustainable, resilient, and protect firefighters. Perhaps maybe even with the use of AI. I imagine this is possible,
Okay.
and we even have a proposal for a PhD student of developing with the aid of AI, maybe a material for protective clothing and maybe testing it. So again, we need a good engineer, a good chemist, so a person with a unique set of skills who might be looking to this. Maybe some smart
Mm-hmm.
sensoring techniques could be
Mm-hmm.
incorporated into PPE somehow to detect the levels. We need to have the standards which are going to tell us when is the dangerous. And as you're aware, there's always a question: how clean is the clean PPE?
Yeah. Yeah.
What level is telling us?
Mm-hmm.
What is monitored? Are they checking water
Mm-hmm.
soluble compounds? Are they checking non-water soluble
Mm-hmm.
compounds?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you might get rid of with water. You might get rid of one class or several classes of contaminants, but some of them will not be reached by water.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've come across. Sometimes fire brigades or firefighters can be a bit concerned about stainage on their kit. It just might be a dye stuff. Could be pen ink. It could be carbon, which, if I understand correctly, carbon is itself a kind of a dye, so it can stain. Is that
Mhm.
true? Yeah, it seems to be the case. Carbon itself can act like a dye. It can actually stain the kit. So the kit may
Yeah,
itself be clean, but there's stains, and that psychologically makes people think that the outer fabric hasn't been cleaned.
yeah.
Is
I,
that
I think carbon is definitely has different modifications, and if you have very very tiny carbon, which is soot in a way, yes, very small nanoparticles, microparticles, they could be easily absorbed, adhered to the PPE.
hmm
And as I said, this carbon cannot be just carbon. This carbon can have something else,
yeah.
benzene or styrene hooked up to them because it's a very porous material. So
Okay.
therefore it might be contained in the pores, and it's not just the color, it can always bring then that nasty odor which is
hmm
going to remain for a long time.
Svetlana, I've really enjoyed chatting to you, and I'm really keen to know more. What is the sort of completion date of InToxFire for anyone that's interested? Where, if anyone's interested, do they find out more about InToxFire? Could you give us some sense of that?
So the project is running until 2027. I think we're scheduled to finish this in September to October 2027. The project is very exciting. We have some experimental work where we're doing testing different PPEs in the lab. I have met our researcher Hamid, who is working hard on this part. We have modeling. We have a PhD student who is actually going to model the transfer of heat,
Okay.
mass transfer through
Huh.
PPE. That will be also quite interesting because there are certain things we can simulate the temperatures which we cannot achieve in the lab. We're doing a lot of, as I said, dissemination workshops. There's one coming up in April, 30th of April. It's workshop free to attend. So our
hmm
founder is very generous, and we have excellent international speakers. As a lot of work is done in USA, and we have two speakers from USA,
hmm
from the UK, and from Ireland who are going. It's giving us this international flavor.
hmm hmm
How the firefighters, their health and their well-being is affected. What can we do? It's a great educational event. So please reach to us. InToxFire.net is our website, but certainly you can reach out to me.
InToxFire.
Yeah. So if you want, please give us a shout. So we want to promote knowledge. We want to promote dissemination. We want to change our standards. We
hmm
want
hmm
to reach out to policymakers. This is the main outputs. And I
Okay.
said we would like our knowledge to be openly available. Okay. So
Okay.
this is the main target.
So what comes next is the event in Dublin, and that's going to be very much a global thing. And the project's going to run till basically September 26th. In the meantime, Svetlana, I mean, you're obviously very well informed. You're doing new things, so you're learning new things. But of everything that you know and that you've learned in the course of the project up and until now, could you give firefighters, fire services a couple of top line steers? What can they do right now with technology as it is, with fire training as it is, with budgets as they are? What would be, say, the top three pieces of advice you would give firefighters or fire brigades?
Well, again, as you said, behavior is very important. And when we talk to younger firefighters, they're more prone to stick to the rules, to remove their PP as they were told instead of driving it, take a shower as soon as possible after the incident. Even if you're rushing to pick up a child from school, perhaps it's better to have a shower and
Yeah.
then get the child. And it's cleaning, decontamination of the skin, of the hair as well is quite important. Hair can hold a lot of contaminants there. Cleaning the PP correctly, accurately, and get engaged with learning, with education.
Hmm.
Try
Hmm.
and join those free courses. They are available.
Hmm.
And I would recommend to reach out. You will learn quite a lot. I learned quite a lot since the start of the project. I learned
Hmm.
about the different, how the PP been decontaminated, and
Hmm.
hunters were really
Hmm.
great when you showed us what do you have for the technology. So those are three things: clean, clean, and learn. Okay, these were my top tips.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's a question I constantly am asked by fire brigades, firefighters. How often should we clean our PPE? How often should we decontaminate our PPE? I mean, at a high level, what would your answer be?
I think it would be useful really to have different PPE for different situations. And I think there are some fire services which have PPE for wildfires. They have PPE for residential fires. It's really important to have PPE which fits male and female. We have growing female firefighters, and it's really important that they have the uniforms set for them. Yeah, I understand this is all expensive, but if we really want to protect our firefighters, and I think we must protect them, so therefore we have to pay money. We have to invest in education, in research. And there's a lot of things which we will not be answered in the project. I imagine, what happens to those waters after firefighting, for instance, what's the contamination of soil and air. There's just lots of things.
Hmm.
So this is my thing. If I would have this magic wand,
Yeah,
invest in education and research and great technologies.
and in terms of cleaning itself, Svetlana, would you say that should be periodic, once a year, twice a year, once a month, or whatever it should be in terms of periodic, or should it be event based? Is it possible to say, or what's your instinct?
What would I do? I think if I would have two fire suits, I would have perhaps the one which is done periodic and the one which is maybe washed if you attended maybe an event which requires a more thorough cleaning.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. It's a difficult question to answer
Hmm.
really.
Hmm.
Yeah, ideally you would like probably to wash it after every incident. But I mean, if there is a really small fire, also, I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult.
It's
There are
impossible to
certainly
say.
unknown things
Yeah,
which are making things worse, such as lithium-ion battery. Okay,
yeah,
this is unknown. We don't have sufficient information about
yeah,
this.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's obviously many unknowns, and hopefully some of those unknowns can be resolved as a course of this fantastic work you're doing at the University of Ulster
Thank
with
you.
InToxFire. Svetlana, I've certainly enjoyed chatting to you. I'm
My
always keen
pleasure.
to learn, and I feel I have learned from this conversation. So thank you very much, and I really look forward to participating on the panel.
Thanks for having me today.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.